The year is 1914. The world stands on the precipice of a monumental shift, one that will alter the course of history forever. Europe, a continent brimming with progress and innovation, is a tapestry of cultures, languages, and ambitions. The early 20th century is a time of great advancements, with cities bustling with life and new technologies promising a brighter future. Yet beneath this veneer of progress, dark clouds gather. Nations are arming themselves, alliances are being forged in secrecy, and the drums of war grow louder with each passing day. Europe is about to plunge into the abyss of war. This was no ordinary conflict. It was a clash of empires, a struggle for global dominance, a war that would forever change the course of human history. The Great War, as it would come to be known, was a cataclysmic event that reshaped borders, toppled monarchies, and left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of humanity. This was the Great War, later known as World War I. It was a conflict that drew in nations from every corner of the globe, turning distant lands into battlegrounds and making soldiers out of ordinary men. From the rolling hills of France, where vineyards and villages became the front lines, to the desolate plains of Russia, where the harsh winters added another layer of suffering to the already brutal conflict. Millions of soldiers would fight and die in a conflict that lasted over 4 long years. The trenches, stretching for miles, became the graves of countless young men, their lives cut short by the relentless machinery of war. This war was unprecedented in its scale and brutality. Never before had the world witnessed such widespread devastation, with entire cities reduced to rubble and landscapes scarred by the relentless bombardment. New technologies like machine guns and poison gas transformed battlefields into landscapes of death. The introduction of these weapons brought a new level of horror to the conflict, making every battle a nightmarish struggle for survival. Entire generations were decimated, leaving behind a trail of grief and destruction that would scar the world for generations to come. Families were torn apart, communities shattered, and the very fabric of society was forever altered. The aftermath of the war saw cities in ruins, economies in tatters, and a world grappling with the immense human cost. The scars of the Great War were not just physical but also psychological, leaving deep wounds that would take decades to heal. But how did this catastrophic conflict begin? What were the events that set the stage for such a monumental tragedy? To understand the Great War, we must delve into the intricate web of political alliances, national ambitions, and historical grievances that led to its outbreak. What forces collided to ignite the flames of war? The answers lie in the complex interplay of power, politics, and personalities that defined early 20th century Europe. To understand the Great War, we must first unravel the complex web of events that led to its outbreak. We must examine the alliances, the rivalries, and the fateful decisions that set the world on a path to destruction. We must journey back to the years leading up to 1914, a time when tensions simmered beneath the surface of European politics, waiting for the spark that would set the world ablaze. It was a period marked by a delicate balance of power, where a single event could tip the scales and plunge the continent into chaos. And that event came on a fateful day in June, when the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand set off a chain reaction, igniting the flames of war and plunging the world into a conflict of unimaginable scale and horror. Europe in the early 20th century was a powder keg waiting to explode. The continent was a complex web of political, economic, and social tensions, each thread pulling tighter as the years went by. The early 1900s saw rapid industrialization, burgeoning nationalism, and a series of political alliances that would ultimately lead to one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. A complex interplay of factors, each contributing to a growing sense of unease and suspicion, set the stage for the eruption of war. Political leaders were often seen in heated discussions, trying to navigate the treacherous waters of international diplomacy. Military parades became more frequent, showcasing the might of nations and stoking the fires of nationalism. The public too felt the tension, as crowded streets buzzed with rumors and anxieties about the future. At the heart of this tension lay a fierce rivalry between the great powers of Europe. Monarchs and political leaders, each with their own ambitions and insecurities, played a dangerous game of power and influence. Historic footage of military officers in uniform and old photographs of European capitals reveal a world on the brink, where every decision could tip the balance towards war. Germany, a rising industrial giant, sought its place in the sun, challenging the established order dominated by Britain and France. The Industrial Revolution had transformed Germany into an economic powerhouse, and its leaders, like Kaiser Wilhelm II, were eager to assert their nation's newfound strength. Military parades and displays of industrial might were not just for show, they were a clear message to the world that Germany was ready to take its place among the great powers. This rivalry fueled a dangerous arms race, with each nation striving to build the most powerful military force. Battleships, artillery, and other military arsenals were amassed in an unprecedented buildup of arms. Soldiers underwent rigorous training, preparing for a conflict that seemed increasingly inevitable. The race for military supremacy created an atmosphere of paranoia and competition, where any sign of weakness could be exploited by rivals. Adding fuel to the fire were a series of alliances that intertwined the fates of nations. Diplomatic efforts to secure peace often resulted in complex treaties and agreements that bound countries together in mutual defense pacts. Maps showing these alliance networks reveal a tangled web of commitments and obligations. Political rallies further inflamed public sentiment, as leaders used nationalist rhetoric to garner support for their policies. Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy formed the Triple Alliance, a powerful bloc that sought to counterbalance the influence of other European powers. Archival images of leaders from these nations, along with photographs of their soldiers, highlight the unity and strength of this alliance. Maps of the time show the strategic importance of this coalition, as it spanned Central and Southern Europe, while France, Russia, and Great Britain countered with the Triple Entente. This alliance was formed in response to the perceived threat posed by the Triple Alliance. Archival images of French, Russian, and British leaders, along with photographs of their soldiers, illustrate the determination of these nations to stand together. Maps highlighting the Triple Entente show a formidable coalition stretching from Western Europe to the vast expanse of Russia. These alliances, intended to deter aggression, ironically serve to magnify tensions and create a climate of fear and mistrust. Historic photographs of European military alliances and footage of military drills underscore the preparations for a potential conflict. Old newspaper headlines about rising tensions reflect the growing anxiety and anticipation of war among the public. Imperial ambitions further exacerbated these rivalries. European powers, driven by a thirst for colonies and resources, clashed in distant corners of the world, from Africa to Asia. Colonial troops in uniform, European flags flying over foreign territories, and old photographs of colonial governors illustrate the global reach of these ambitions. European powers, driven by a thirst for colonies and resources, clashed in distant corners of the world, from Africa to Asia. Images of European explorers in Africa and Asia, colonial-era maps showing European territories, and archival footage of colonial military expeditions highlight the extent of these imperial ambitions. The competition for colonies not only strained relations between European powers, but also sowed the seeds of conflict in the colonies themselves. These colonial conflicts fueled nationalist sentiments, pitting nation against nation in a struggle for prestige and power. Nationalist protests and rallies in the early 1900s, old photographs of colonial conflicts, and images of European propaganda posters reveal the fervor and intensity of these sentiments. Nationalism became a powerful force, driving nations to assert their dominance and defend their honor at all costs. And then, in the heart of the Balkans, a region already simmering with ethnic and nationalist tensions, the spark that ignited the powder keg was struck. Archival footage of the Balkans region, images of ethnic groups in traditional attire, and historic maps of the area show a land fraught with division and unrest. The Balkans had long been a hotspot of conflict, and it was here that the final catalyst for war would emerge. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo. Photographs of the Archduke, images of Sarajevo in 1914, and historic footage of the assassination site capture the gravity of this event. The assassination was a shocking act of violence that sent shockwaves through Europe, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to war. This act of terrorism, carried out by a Serbian nationalist, set in motion a chain reaction that would plunge Europe into the abyss. A portrait of Gavrilo Princip, images of the aftermath of the assassination, and archival footage depicting the start of World War I illustrate the immediate and far-reaching consequences of this single act. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark that ignited the powder keg, leading to a conflict that would engulf the world and change the course of history forever. With the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, a pivotal moment in history was set into motion. This event, which took place on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, was the spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe. The Archduke, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was killed by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist. This assassination was not just a tragic loss for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but also a catalyst for a series of events that would lead to one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The intricate web of alliances woven across Europe began to tighten. These alliances, initially designed to maintain a balance of power and prevent large-scale wars, now became the very mechanisms that propelled the continent into conflict. The major powers of Europe were bound by treaties and agreements that obligated them to defend each other, creating a domino effect that would soon engulf the entire continent. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding retribution for the assassination. The ultimatum contained a series of harsh demands, which were almost impossible for Serbia to accept in full. This was a calculated move by Austria-Hungary, with the support of Germany, to assert its dominance in the Balkans, and to punish Serbia for its perceived role in the assassination. Serbia, supported by Russia, refused to comply with all the demands. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic nations and having its own interests in the Balkans, began to mobilize its forces in support of Serbia. This act of defiance by Serbia and the subsequent mobilization by Russia set the stage for a broader conflict. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, setting in motion the domino effect of alliances. This declaration of war was the first in a series of events that would lead to a full-scale global conflict. The mobilization of armies and the declarations of war that followed were swift and relentless. Germany, bound by its treaty with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia on August 1st. Germany's military strategy, known as the Schlieffen Plan, called for a quick defeat of France before turning its full attention to Russia. This plan required Germany to act swiftly and decisively, leading to a rapid escalation of the conflict. And on France, 2 days later, Germany's invasion of Belgium, a neutral country, in order to outflank French defenses, brought Great Britain into the war. The violation of Belgian neutrality was a key factor in Britain's decision to join the conflict, as it had guaranteed Belgium's neutrality through a treaty. Great Britain, obligated to defend Belgium's neutrality after Germany invaded the small nation, declared war on Germany on August 4th. The entry of Great Britain into the war marked the beginning of a truly global conflict, as Britain's vast empire and its dominions around the world were now involved. Within a matter of days, the great powers of Europe were at war. The mobilization of millions of soldiers, the movement of vast armies, and the preparation for a conflict of unprecedented scale were now underway. The world watched in a mix of anticipation and dread as the situation rapidly deteriorated. The Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary, faced off against the Allied powers, Great Britain, France and Russia. These alliances would shape the course of the war, with each side drawing on their respective strengths and resources in a bid for dominance. Italy, initially part of the Triple Alliance, remained neutral at the war's outbreak, eventually joining the Allied cause in 1915. Italy's decision to switch sides was influenced by promises of territorial gains at the expense of Austria-Hungary, highlighting the complex and often opportunistic nature of wartime alliances. The Ottoman Empire, sensing an opportunity to regain lost territories, joined the Central Powers in late 1914, further expanding the conflict's reach. The entry of the Ottoman Empire into the war opened new fronts in the Middle East and the Caucasus, adding to the complexity and scale of the conflict. Japan, allied with Great Britain, seized German colonies in Asia and the Pacific. Japan's involvement in the war was driven by its own imperial ambitions and the desire to expand its influence in the region. The seizure of German colonies was a strategic move that further demonstrated the global nature of the conflict. The world watched in horror as the conflict escalated, drawing in nations from across the globe. What began as a regional dispute quickly transformed into a global war, affecting millions of lives and reshaping the political landscape of the 20th century. The alliances and empires that had once sought to maintain peace now found themselves embroiled in a war that would leave an indelible mark on history.